I made this piece for a budget that could basically put me out of business. Normally, something this elaborate would cost a lot more, but this piece is for a valued client that I've built several pieces for in the past, so in exchange for more creative freedom and the opportunity to learn some new skills, I agreed to make it for a price below market value. So now the only challenge is getting it done with all these features I've never made before in a time frame that won't break the bank. Okay, so with my materials in hand and milling underway, let's talk about the piece I'm making here. I'm calling it the Shoecrenza, and I think it's the first of its kind in the world. Okay, maybe it's just a shoe storage cabinet / bench, but I still think it's awesome and cool enough for a name like Shoecrenza. Most of the features on this project involve methods I've never used before. It has a solid mitered ash case with tenon interior dividers, a large chamfer on the front edge, a random width shiplap back panel, and template routed walnut leg assemblies. Finally, I'm trying my hand for the first time at upholstery. For scale, it's around 40 inches long, 24 inches high, and 13 inches wide. North Carolina isn't known for its cold winters, but it's only January here, and I've already burned through $52 on 2 propane tank refills for my shop heater, and today I'm robbing the grill to avoid the cold. I think my shop is too big for my current heater, and I need a different solution. So thanks to Inokraft for sponsoring this video and helping me stay warm and save money this winter. More on that later. I had a friend of mine cut out this leg template on his CNC machine. I've never done a leg assembly like this before, so I was eager to try it out. I'll lay out each part of the leg using this template and cut them out on the bandsaw. The grain orientation is important here. I want each segment to have the grain running along its length. These 4 pieces will be attached together with dominoes, and I'm going to do my best to leave them plenty oversized, which will make it a little easier to line things up for template routing later. After I cut out the first couple pieces, I realized that I could make my life easier when clamping these up if I left a few extra tags on the ends of the horizontal pieces to serve as clamping cauls. I'll cut away the excess after glue up. So the most important thing about making leg assemblies like this is you have to get the angles exactly right if you want to make the joints tight. So I'm using a combination of sleds and my miter gauge to set these up and cut them carefully. And don't let the movie magic here fool you. In several cases, I had to make small adjustments and then cut them several times until things fit together tightly without any gaps. A basic plywood sled is a really valuable tool. You can just cut a fresh edge whenever you need to use it again and know that's right where your cut line is. Double-sided tape works great to hold things down, and for extra clamping force, you can screw in a bridge piece like this using an offcut or another component as support. While I cut in these dominoes and glue up my first leg assembly, I want to jump back to something I said at the beginning. I took on this commission at below market value in exchange for creative freedom and the opportunity to try new things. You might be wondering why I would do that. So I've been doing custom furniture commissions for several years now, and one thing I've found is that it's rarely fulfilling as a furniture designer to just basically make replicas of pieces that customers find online. That is, to make a copy of someone else's designs. But quite often, trying to be original and novel often leads to processes that take a lot of time, or which I've never done before and can't reasonably charge extra for taking the time to figure it out. And therefore, occasionally I do projects like this where I basically just suck it up and invest more time and effort into a piece than I'm actually charging. But this is worth it for me to do sometimes because it lets me both grow my body of original work and try design styles and techniques that I've never used before, which also improves my skills. So that said, you're probably wondering what I'm charging for this piece and what I probably should charge for it if I were just making it and selling it on spec. I'm charging my client $1,200 for the Shoecrenza. And if I were to sell it on spec, I'd probably be asking more like $2,800 for it. But I'm using my home milled ash and I got the walnut for a bargain, which helps keep my costs low. Back on the build, I'm not sure I could have done this more easily, but the angles I ended up with for this leg design made for a pretty awkward and difficult glue up. The dominoes all had to come together in just the right order, and I ended up having to go back and cut one of the bottom dominoes extra wide to accommodate the location of the tenon as the back leg swings in. But overall, it really wasn't so bad, and the joints turned out nice and tight. Alright, let's take a break from working on the legs. There's plenty more to do there, but I wanted to get started on the ash case of the Shoecrenza. This case is going to be mitered and made up of panels that are 14 inches wide starting out, so I wanted to get those panels going. I'll also make the 2 divider panels that we'll install later with dados and tenons, which was one of my new methods that I'm trying for the first time here. But we'll worry about that in a minute. For now, let's kick back and enjoy one of my favorite woodworking tasks, making panels. Before I can turn these panels into a mitered box, I need to prepare them to hold the internal dividers. So I'm going to make a stop dado using my plunge router and a 1/2 inch spiral upcut bit. I've placed both panels with their back edges together and inside faces up here, and we'll cut those dados at the same time to ensure they line up perfectly once they are the top and bottom panels of the case. For the dados on the vertical divider and the left side of the case, I'm just going to have to measure very carefully because those panels are different lengths. But you can't lose too much sleep on things like this, and eventually you just have to trust your math and be prepared to deal with the consequences, come what may. Now, I know what you're thinking. This guy has been building this thing for 10 minutes already and hasn't even made a box yet. Well, fear not. It's almost box time. Cutting the miters on the short panels was super simple, but I didn't have a great way of making these mitered crosscuts safely on the table saw for the long ones. I tried getting creative with my miter gauge, but didn't account for the fact that my infeed space is too narrow for the panel. Thankfully, I do have a track saw. I didn't want to use it because I just don't find it terribly accurate and stable when cutting miters like this, but in a pinch, it'll do, as long as you're paying attention and know what you're doing. Alright, so I managed to make a mistake. I just finished cutting this miter and then realized that I have a groove here, which means that I cut this miter backward. I should have flipped the panel over. Thankfully, it is fixable. It does mean that this panel will be shorter overall, so I'm gonna have to cut it the other way, and then I'll have to go and make the bottom panel shorter by the same amount so that they're equal lengths. Yep, it's easy to make mistakes. Okay, friends, it's officially box time. It's officially domino time, which is the precursor to official box time. Just hang in there with me. And box time. With the case dry assembled, I could start moving my attention toward fitting the divider panels. And the first step toward that was squaring up the ends of my dados. One of the tricky things about making stuff out of wood is that it's really hard to put it back on after you cut it away. Those of us who eventually succeed to any degree at woodworking learn the art of slightly oversizing stuff until the exact moment it's time to take it to its final size. And that's what I'm doing here. It can be painstaking, but you'll see how satisfying it is when it fits perfectly in a minute. There's a sound to it. Whoosh, click, just wait, you'll see what I mean. In the meantime, let's dial in these tongues. Alright, still too long. I'll shave off a little from the bottom side. It can afford to be a little shorter because the panel will rest on the shoulders of the tongue and you won't see the gap below. I'll remove a small chunk of material from the front end of the divider tongue to allow it to overlap slightly and maintain a clean reveal at the front of the cabinet. And for all you woodworking ASMR folks out there, I'm grateful to Inokraft for sponsoring this video. They generously provided me with their MH E7500 electric garage heater to keep me warm in my shop. This direct wired electric heater runs on a dedicated 45 amp circuit on 240 volts and can heat up a 750 square foot shop quickly and quietly. Installation is easy once your circuit is in place. Simply choose a location and secure the upper mounting bracket to a ceiling joist using the provided lag screws. It can either be mounted in a fixed position using 2 screws or using a single screw in the center to allow the heater to pivot during use. To install the electric cable, just turn off the circuit breaker and attach the 2 hot leads and the ground wire to their designated locations on the heater. Operating my Inokraft heater is as simple as turning it on with a remote. I can set a timer to let it auto shut off, and can even just turn on eco mode and let it target a certain temperature automatically. This thing is also very quiet, operating at below 60 decibels, which is ideal while shooting video and avoiding a ton of background noise. And finally, it's CSA certified and backed by a 1-year warranty and premium Inokraft customer support. It's available in 3 sizes, 5,000, 7,500, and 10,000 watts, which roughly correspond to a 1, 2, and 3 car garage. I'm finally looking forward to working in my shop this winter. Nothing against heating with propane, but I think this Inokraft electric heater is a better solution for my shop long term. If you'd like to grab an Inokraft garage heater for your own shop, I'll leave a link in the description. Thanks again to Inokraft for helping me heat fast, heat smart, quiet, and safe. With the case in a good spot, we can turn our attention back to the legs. I treated a few spots with epoxy and let that cure, and now it's time to trim them up and add a nice edge profile. I took the top bearing off my flush trim bit so that I could use it as a templating bit because my leg assemblies are too thick to trim in a single flush trim pass. I'll add it back later for the second pass. The inside corners on my leg template are pretty tight, but since the template was cut out with a 1/4 inch bit, I should be able to use this little guy and let the shank ride against the template to clear them out. And then I'll follow that with a flush trim pass. Learning new skills always comes with its mistakes. I placed this outer domino way too close to the outside edge, and it showed through once I flush trimmed it. This issue is in a pretty visible location, so I need to make the repair as good of an end grain match as I possibly can. I think this piece will work fine. To start, I'll prep the patch by sanding it flat on one side over at the belt sander. Then I'll carefully mark the area I need to remove, following the grain lines, and route it out using this tiny 1/8 inch spiral bit. To make a template of the exact shape of this recess, I'll trace the edges onto some blue tape and cut it out. Then transfer that onto the area of the patch I want to use. With the shape of my patch clearly marked out, I can carefully sand right up to my line and repeat until the patch fits into the recess. Then I'll just glue it in place, wait until it's dry, and shape it back to normal. and that will work for me. I'll use this giant roundover bit to put a curved profile on these that still has a sharp edge. Now they just need a little more sanding and they'll be ready for finish. Okay, the case is ready for final assembly, and to do that, I need corner clamping cauls. And if you're out there watching me CA glue these with blue tape and making note to try that on your own project, just ignore the blue tape. It did an awful job holding those cauls in place under clamping pressure, and I ended up just gluing them directly to the wood. It was a bit of a pain to clean up afterward, but better than not getting tight corners on the case. And for what it's worth, these red clamps didn't really do much to keep the case square, because it was already square. But they made me feel good when I put them on, because my case was so very square. The good news about gluing my corner cauls directly to the ash case is that I was able to remove them and clean everything up without any tear out, and it was all fine in the end. So every project I make has a stage that I have to think about a lot. On this Shoecrenza, this was that stage. I needed a way to attach the legs to the case that would both account for wood movement and ensure that I could align both legs on the case at the exact same respective location in order to ensure symmetry and, well, that it wouldn't be all wobbly. The case is designed to sit exactly 3 inches off the ground, so I made a pair of 3-inch wide bunks to elevate the case. To align the legs, what I came up with was first to drill some holes through my template with it held against the case, now elevated to the correct height. These pilot holes will locate the center of several dowels that will serve as indexing pins for the leg assemblies. At this point, I'll also make a sled to make a repeatable setup to cut the legs to final length. Doing it this way ensures that the legs will contact the ground at a single plane and at the correct angle. I'll pre-drill a separate set of holes into the legs and oversized holes through the case. These will allow screws to pass through the case and hold the legs in place, while also allowing a small amount of room for wood movement. To make it easier to pre-thread the holes, I like to run a little paraffin wax along the threads. This is the same wax that I use to lubricate my hand plane soles. This was one of the most exciting moments in the build for me. It's starting to look like the idea I've had in my head all along, and I am loving it. At this point in time, I've been seriously woodworking for about 5 years. And in that time, I've heard from so many experienced furniture makers that it's the details that make a piece come together and create impact on the observer. The right details just blend into the overall look of the piece without necessarily drawing attention to themselves. For that reason, I'm gonna add a big chamfer to the front of the case. That, and because I just really wanted to use this enormous chamfer bit I just got. And with the front edge ready to go, I can finally start working on the back panel and tick off another first for me on this project. The back of this cabinet is going to consist of a bunch of random width shiplap planks that will rest in a rabbet cut into the back edge of the case. I could have, and maybe should have, cut this rabbet on the panels before glue up. But apart from a little ridicule from my friend Scott over at Square and Level Designs, it really wasn't that bad, and we got there in the end. Off camera, I thicknessed and drum sanded my planks. To turn these into shiplap, I used the same rabbeting bit I used on the case to cut rabbets half the thickness of the plank on opposite sides of each. Also, this is why you should always use a starter pin on a router table. Lucky for me, I wasn't injured and these are extra long, so that chunk will get cut away. But I won't do that again. The key to getting all the shiplapped parts to fit together seamlessly is to have two planks with rabbets on the same side. One to offset the pattern and one final one like this to cover the last edges. Each of these will get a single screw in the middle of the top and bottom to hold them in place and allow for seasonal wood movement. These cards function as spacers to put about 1/32 of an inch between each board so they aren't packed in too tightly. Now that everything is fitted and pre-assembled, it's time to glue in the interior divider panels. Even though I worked hard to ensure that, for my part, the feet are perfectly level, you can't always count on the floor being perfect. So I'll install some adjustable feet that are fully recessed into the legs. In one of my first videos I ever made, I showed how I power carved the bottom of a huge conference table. And ever since that project, I've been wanting to break out the angle grinder and try that again. So I decided that any shoe storage bench aspiring to a name like the Shoecrenza can't have plain, boring, flat sides. Now, there's nothing quite like spending dozens of hours creating a piece of furniture and then taking an angle grinder to it with a spherical sculpting bit you've never used before. So I practiced a little bit first. This helped me work out how to hold the grinder and what to expect so that it doesn't run away from me and create a huge canyon where I wanted a little dimple. This is basically the texture I'm going for. So, here goes nothing. Fortune favors the bold, right? Eventually, I got into a groove, and also discovered a very weird looking and also very stable way to hold the grinder that let me have a ton of control and work quickly. For the most part, I didn't get much tear out with my carbide sphere cutter, but it did leave behind slight imperfections that needed to be sanded. And since I didn't want to sand several hundred little dots by hand, I found these little pink sanding spheres and just free-handed my trim router like it was a big Dremel tool and just went for it. The Shoecrenza would hardly be a bench worthy of such renown, fame, and honor if it was merely a phenomenal shoe storage cabinet, but a horrible bench. So I had to make the top of it a proper seat. And that means I get to try upholstery for the first time. What I'm doing here is preparing some 1/2-inch plywood to serve as the base for the cushion. I want the corners to look nice, so I'm going to round them here a bit. The corners are the only thing I'm really nervous about looking right. I don't want this thing to look like a poorly wrapped Christmas present, so I've got to figure out a nice way to eliminate or embrace the folds here. Anyway, I found this project foam online, and I've got to say, it's pretty nice for how affordable it is. I'll put a link to the place I got it on this cardboard box I'm holding if you're thinking about trying this kind of upholstery yourself. Now, I'll save this wrapper stuff for later. But for now, let's cut out some foam. The next layer in my cushion is this fluffy cotton batting. I didn't feel it would be safe to use a huge roundover bit on this upholstery foam, so to get a similar effect, I'll just put this batting tightly around the corners and staple it to the bottom. All of my layers will be held together with contact cement, and this 3M spray application kind is essential to the process. There's no way you could roll liquid contact cement on this batting without making a giant sticky mess. But with the spray stuff, you just spray it evenly on both surfaces, wait a few minutes, and stick the two sides together. With everything stuck together, I'll start stretching the batting and stapling it along the edges, making sure to pull it tight around the corners as I go. And here you can see as I finish wrapping the corners, they're a lot less cornery now. Now for the fabric itself. I absolutely love this material, and I think my client's gonna love it too. In the initial drawing I sent them, I just painted it green because I thought it looked good, and they took it as a color proposal and loved it. And so we worked together to find one that matched some other items in their house. This is a performance fabric, and it's supposedly designed to repel water and stains, and it's also meant to be resistant to abrasion and pilling. So I'm excited to see how it holds up. It will get cut out, glued, and stapled into place as well. Then, at last, I had to face my fears and address the corners. It feels really random to just pull this stuff around and cut out triangle-shaped bits of fabric here and there, but I eventually worked out what needed to be removed in order to get this double fold corner look. I have no idea if this is even a way this is ever done, but to me, it looks better than the gift wrap look. After a few hundred staples and a little bit of trimming, the final task was to grab that cotton wrap the foam came in, tidy up the bottom of the cushion, and try it out. I'd say it meets Shoecrenza standards for comfort. Now I'll start the finish process. In this case, just a blend of a couple Minwax stains and Osmo for a top coat. This is always the phase of the project where I'm both happy to see it all finally take on its final look and having to force myself a little bit to keep going because part of me is already ready to move on to the next project. This project challenged me, and it didn't have to. I could have taken the easy course and just made a copy of the basic one my client found online. I could have passed on the opportunity to get paid to stretch my skills. But I know that by digging in and trying all these new methods, I've added more value to both my client and myself than I would have otherwise. Not every project I build will be a playground for creating a unique piece brimming with opportunities to try new things and hone my skills. I can't afford to do this kind of experimentation on every project. But on this one, I'm glad I put in the extra effort to make something as grand, as exquisite, and as regal as the Shoecrenza. See, when I look at this magnificent furniture specimen, I don't see primarily a place where people will put their butts and store their muddy shoes. I see it as a place people will sit when they enter a home, and the last place they'll sit before stepping out into a big, wide world. A wise man once said, "It's dangerous business walking out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you'll be swept off to." That may be true, but at least those steps will only be taken after sitting to put on shoes stored in a Shoecrenza.